leads to the Vengeance 2007 pay-per-view. The faithful night, June 24th, 2007. The match that was promoted and was supposed to happen was the finals of the ECW Championship Tournament, where it was supposed to be CM Punk against Chris Benoit. And Chris Benoit does not show up to the event. He's replaced by a rechristened Johnny Nitro as John Morrison. And John Morrison actually wins the ECW title. And people are very upset that Benoit's not there. It's a big deal. It's a big story. Before you knew anything, I think we were watching the show together, because I do remember the main event being a strange kind of multi-man match for the title. What do you remember thinking it was weird Benoit didn't show up, and did you think in a million years that this is what happened?
I thought it was very weird, because that kind of thing didn't happen.
Right.
And it didn't happen where they didn't really say why they weren't there.
Right.
Like there's a lot of like either legitimate injuries or vacation injuries that happened over the course of wrestling, where it's announced beforehand though, and it's not definitely for like a main event caliber booked match where all of a sudden something suddenly came up and this wrestler needs to be replaced.
Right.
I can't think of really very many other instances where that has happened.
Yeah, I remember for me, because you'd go to because we went to so many indie shows, and you never knew if somebody was going to show up, because it'd be an indie show. So a lot of times people would no-show the show. They wouldn't give a crap. They'd be unprofessional. There'd also be the times where Stone Cold walked out on WWE, so I thought maybe Benoit was pissed because he was champion just a couple years prior, and it was clear that like the years after this, he was kind of taking some time, like falling back down the card a little bit. So I thought maybe he was a little unhappy with his spot in the company. Maybe he had a dispute with WWE. But yeah, it was very, very strange, and I definitely was not thinking at all, though, that something horrible had occurred. But I will say that you just didn't expect this from Chris Benoit. He always seemed like the most professional guy. For him to not show up just seemed like a strange deal.
Yeah, definitely.
So this leads to, and I'm not going to get into all of I don't want this is a SummerSlam 2007 retrospective podcast. I don't want this to become a big, huge, the ins and outs of everything related to Chris Benoit. But obviously, why he didn't show up to Vengeance, he passes away. He's found dead, as is his son and his wife. The next day, when you hear that Chris Benoit has passed away, what were you thinking?
I mean, just shock. Just so shocked that anything happened. It made sense looking back, and I was like, oh well, like. Yeah.
And I mean, he was somebody for you, one of your favorites. I mean, we have you went to WrestleMania 20. He was somebody who brought one of the major moments of that show, obviously, is Benoit winning the title and afterwards celebrating with Eddie Guerrero in the ring. And now here we are, just 3 years removed from that, and one of the biggest stars in all of wrestling has done is dead. It was heartbreaking, especially just a year and a half after losing Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of like the biggest thing was it felt like, losing them so close together was the most like shocking part, as it turns out for very different reasons, of course. But
right. And I remember for me, when Eddie Guerrero passed away, you had texted me kind of a famous story. I was in the big bus terminal, Grand Central Station in New York City, running through there, and I remember I got a text from you that just said Eddie Guerrero passed away. And looking back, I'm not sure what else. Like I at least appreciated my sister's done. You're never going to believe who passed away. And then it's like becomes this really awkward, awful guessing game. Right. So I at least appreciated that, or you're never going to believe what happened to this person.
Yeah. And that, that's always the worst when it's like, did you hear about so-and-so? Like, it's right. Like, oh, okay. Like, did he die? Did he get arrested? Like, well, what happened?
Right. Exactly. So I appreciate it, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I stopped there. Eddie Guerrero was like seemingly good, and had seemingly gotten better and overcome all these demons, and now to just die tragically was horrible. And so then you find out that Benoit, that I got a call from my buddy Matt, and he said, "Did you hear why Benoit?" And I'll never forget the way that he said it. He called me on the phone. I think I was running late to a shift over at your favorite and mine, the Little Neck Stop and Shop, and he's like, "Did you hear why Benoit missed vengeance?" And I said, "No." And he said, "He's dead!" in the loudest screeching voice I've ever heard in my life. And I was like, holy crap. And he's like, yeah, oh my God. They're going to be going live on WWE.com with a press conference in a little while. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, all of a sudden, like, this is terrible. And then it blew up. It started becoming everywhere. He and his wife and his son had passed away. And I immediately thought, oh God, somebody had broken into his house and killed all three of them. And the press conference they did was, I think Vince McMahon was live in the ring from the arena. The crazy part about that is that WWE was promoting that Raw as a 3-hour Raw where all members of the roster were there for Vince McMahon's funeral. And they were going to do a tribute show to Vince McMahon, very similar to the shows they've done for Owen Hart and Eddie Guerrero, complete with the sad speeches in the room where the wrestler talks about memories of the person. Very nice tributes, and it was all going to be kind of done tongue-in-cheek, to the point that they had a casket and kind of the whole deal where, you know, the big like limousine type thing that they the hearse that they come into. His actual real life brother, who just passed away last year, was there and was going to actually be there to give a tribute to Vince McMahon. All this nonsense they were doing, and then this breaks, and Vince McMahon goes live, says obviously that it was an angle. They have no choice at this point but to just cut the stupid Vince McMahon is dead angle, and he announces that Benoit is dead and that they're doing a tribute on Raw that night.
And yet, I feel like they had to convince him to drop the angle.
Oh, I think for sure. I bet he came in and was like, how do we continue this?
Yeah, like, how can we do both?
Right.
Can we make it like a joint kind of thing where we're you know, celebrating both of us? And, you know, to be honest, in hindsight, like, maybe that would have been the better option after hearing what came out and everything. Like, to had they not said anything, had they not said anything other than Chris Benoit has passed away, until all of the other stuff came out about this, maybe to kind of but on the same time, like, the fact that Vince was murdered, it wasn't like a suicide thing or anything like that. Like, the fact that it was him, like, blowing up a limousine, you know, maybe I guess they should have cut it either way. But, like, hindsight being 2020, like, you know, what they did maybe was not the best move.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem for them always is that they have to have the show go on. They can't just, hey, this shit is going on right now and things are messed up and the talent is clearly shook. Let's just take the night off. We're not on there. We're going to rerun Vengeance on live TV tonight. Watch the show, enjoy it. That match will be cut and we'll be back next week on Raw. Give it a little bit of time for this to develop, because I remember when the tribute show had happened, and I told you this before we went on air, my father called me and was, I can't believe they're doing a tribute. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, isn't it clear that he's the one who did this? And I was just like, how could you ever say that? Chris Benoit would never do something like that. And he was like, I don't know. I mean, the guy's living in a gated community. I don't know if anyone's breaking into his house to do this. And I was like, no, I'm thinking, no way. And so you watch the tribute show, and for the first, I think, like 2 hours of that show, it's they have the in memory of, and they have Benoit and Nancy and Daniel, and the picture of the three of them on the bottom of the screen with all these wrestlers giving these tributes. And all of them have these really heartfelt tributes, except William Regal, who kind of says something like really eerie. And I'm even getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it here, because it really was. It was like, he was like, I think I'm going to hold off on giving my judgment right now. Let's wait till the facts unfold. And he kind of knew, I think. And then later on, they actually find out before Raw ends that Benoit does it, because it starts to break in the middle of that show.
Yeah.
And so they change it from like that, the three of them on the bottom of the screen, to just Benoit there and just play his matches to end out the show. I don't know if that was the right call. I think at that point, I'm not sure what you do. But I think if they just waited a day, that would have been the thing to do, is just, hey, this show's, dedicated to Chris Benoit. Here's vengeance from last night. Let's go home. And because the next night they do a SmackDown like nothing happened. Show has to go on, and they film SmackDown. And I mean, if you go on Peacock, that Benoit Raw has been replaced by like greatest championship matches. And the SmackDown is just a show. Like, it's just like they just picked it up.
Well, and rightfully so, because
yeah.
But that is the problem with having a P.T. Barnum type runner, where the show must go on, and we're going to make we're gonna make the most out of it. We're gonna make lemonade out of this and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, but that's kind of also what happens, where you run the risk of, when you create this whole thing around this person that turns out to not be who, with all the story and everything, where it's not what you thought at the beginning.
Yeah.
Especially when it's live. Like,
yeah.
If they had like taped it and then said, okay, we're going to do this for SmackDown instead. We're going to tape this whole thing on Monday, whatever, and then we're going to play it later. And then it finds out. You have time to not play it.
Right. Exactly.
When you put it on live, and then you find out mid-show the horrible details of what happened, now you're scrambling, and now you're probably not going to make a right decision, because the right decision would have been to not do this in the first place.
Right.
But
it was. I mean, it was such a scare. I think I cut you off as you were going to say something. Yeah, it was I mean, it really was. It was such a shocking deal. It became a very strange time to be a fan. I mean, I know the guys at Talking Taker have talked about how this got them to stop watching for like years. They're one of their favorite wrestlers doing something so horrible and an awful act like this. I think for us, one of the I wonder if, I don't know if I'd ever stop. But I do wonder if part of the reason why we continue to just mosey on and continue to watch is because we did have SummerSlam tickets. Because these tickets for SummerSlam went on sale in December of 2006, and I think we got them like right away. The show sold out in like 30 minutes. I wonder if that played a role.
I think it was also kind of like we were so more like invested and engrossed in just the event of pro wrestling more than anything. It wasn't, especially for you, where you were going to Ring of Honor and TNA and like all this other sort of stuff. Like, it's not so much like, when you are so diverse, it's not so necessarily like, I'm going to stop watching WWE. I'm going to stop wrestling altogether, because you do have those other shows. And I mean, I'll be honest, now that I've started watching again, I really only have been watching AEW. I really haven't been paying too much attention to WWE. Yeah,
I know. I mean, it's definitely, I think you're right. And I think that for me, I remember it being one of these deals where once this happened, for the next like 3 weeks, this was the only story. Like, you could not escape it. It was on every news station, every ESPN, every Sports Center, ESPN News, which I typically used to go to sleep with each night. I just play it on while I fell asleep. They just updated Benoit every 10 minutes. It was awful. Like, it was just a terrible time to be a fan. It was scary. It was awful. And I mentioned earlier that I was working at the time with individuals on the autism spectrum. And when Vince McMahon did the angle where he passed away, they were heartbroken by this. Heartbroken, like really sad. And I had to sit down with each one of them, kind of go through a therapy and explain that this is a part of the show. He didn't really pass away. And then you come to find out Benoit happens 2 weeks later. And they're like, we know it's not real because we've just been told this other guy was part of the show.
Why would you?
Now it's like, guys, no, this one actually happened. And so it was really tough for them. I remember like one of the deals, I think like the headlines on one of the newspapers that was like all over New York, maybe it was the New York Post, probably the New York Post, said like Benoit kills son because he's disabled. And like that was really hard. Like
that sounds like a New York Post headline, yeah.
Right, like something awful like that, yeah. So yeah, it was a really, really tough time to be a fan.